sight. Get what we need.
And this is this week's Classic Classic.
When Bram Stoker wrote his literary classic Dracula in 1897, little did he realize the impact his vampire character would have in motion pictures. Based on the true-life historical figure Vlad Tepes, who was known as Vlad the Impaler, Dracula appeared in over 100 films. Tepes, a Romanian ruler, was known not for drinking the blood of his victims, but instead he spilled the blood of his enemies by the method of impaling their bodies on a wooden stake. Tepes lived in a castle high in the Carpathian Mountains of Romania, not far from the village of Transylvania, the birthplace of Count Dracula, as written by Bram Stoker. The legend of Tepes made for good folklore in developing the Prince of Darkness's character for the book Dracula, one of literature's most read novels. Although there were other silent films made in the early 1900s about vampires, it was the 1922 classic movie Nosferatu that was based on Stoker's novel. Trying to avoid copyright payments, the name of the vampire was changed to Count Orlok. The name change did little to prevent Stoker's widow from suing the filmmakers for blatant plagiarism. The haunting performance of Orlok was portrayed by an actor who went by the name of Max Schreck. With his gaunt look and frozen bug-eyed stare, Schreck brought chills up the spine to those watching. This cinematic masterpiece, directed by famed German filmmaker F.W. Murnau, was ordered by the courts to be destroyed after a legal battle in court with Stoker's widow, but thankfully some copies survived. A remake of the film starring Dutch actor Klaus Kinski, father of Natasha, paled in comparison to the original film. And interestingly, a film of some noteworthy is the movie Shadow of the Vampire. Actor John Malkovich plays the part of F.W. Murnau, who hires William Dafoe to play Orlok, but in reality, the Dafoe character turns out to be a real vampire. But it was in 1931, 9 years after Nosferatu, the cinema brought new life to Dracula when a new screen version was made. Lon Chaney, the man of 1,000 faces, was slated to play the role of Count Dracula, but his untimely death from cancer opened the way for a relatively unknown actor named Bela Lugosi to don the cape. Born Bela Blasko in 1882 in Hungary, Lugosi had been portraying the Count in a stage adaptation of Dracula. Although he was often stiff and animated in his performance, his dark European looks and his distinguished but yet hard to understand accent made him perfect for the role of Dracula. The film, directed by Todd Browning, was a huge success. The captive audience was frightened by Lugosi's airy vampire, but by today's standards, the film is quite tame. Arguably, Lugosi is the definitive Count Dracula. Bela would go on to portray a vampire again in the mystery film Midnight After Dark and The Return of the Vampire, but was not known as Dracula in either picture. Universal Pictures later turned to Shakespearean actor John Carradine to play Dracula in a few films, and Lon Chaney Jr., known more to moviegoers as the Wolfman, starred in Son of Dracula as Count Alucard, which is Dracula spelled backwards. There was even Daughter of Dracula with Gloria Holden and Dracula's Dog, if you can believe that. Lugosi would step out of the shadows and portray Dracula once more in Universal's 1948 comedy Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, but this time he played Dracula purely for laughs.
A person can get killed that way.
I hope you weren't disturbed, Dr. Leho.
It is perfectly right, my dear. Introduce me.
This is Miss Raymond, Mr. Young, and this is Wilbur.
Ah, Wilbur. Why? I heard so much about you, I feel as if we have already met. I must say, my dear, I approve very highly of your choice. What we need today is young blood and brains. Oh, don't be bashful. Come.
Lugosi appeared in over 100 movies, most of them in the horror genre. Director Ed Wood, noted for being the cheapest director in film history, used some footage he had shot of Lugosi in his Dracula cloak and inserted his scenes into a film that many consider the worst movie ever made, Plan 9 from Outer Space. Lugosi died before the film was completed. Lugosi passed away in 1956 from a heart attack. For years he battled depression as well as morphine addiction along with other substances abuse. Bela Lugosi, the screen's definitive Count, was laid to rest in full Dracula outfit.
I am Dracula.
Oh, it's really good to see you. I don't know what happened to the driver and my luggage and with all this, I thought I was in the wrong place.
I bid you welcome.
Throughout the 50s and 60s, there were dozens of B-vampire and Dracula films with such inane titles as Adam Age Vampire, Billy the Kid vs. Dracula, Old Mother Riley Meets the Vampires, and Fiancé of Dracula. What? No mother-in-law of Dracula? But in 1959, Dracula would rise again. Hammer Films, based out of England, released what many consider the finest Dracula movie ever, casting the relatively unknown 6'5" British actor Christopher Lee. The film, titled The Horror of Dracula, brought new chills to movie audiences with lots of blood, now seen in beautiful Technicolor. The film also starred actor Peter Cushing as Dracula's nemesis, Professor Abraham Van Helsing. What Lugosi brought to Dracula in his aristocratic European-style characterization, Lee took it a step forward by adding a mixture of nobility with sensuality. Christopher Lee also portrayed the Frankenstein monster and the mummy in Hammer Films, somewhat remakes of the earlier Universal movies. Not wishing to be typecast as just Dracula, Lee declined to flap his wings in Hammer's next production, The Brides of Dracula. Hammer, choosing not to hurt the image that Christopher Lee created with his portrayal of Dracula, decided to cast unknown actor David Pale to portray a vampire named Baron Meinster. The film not only lacked Dracula, even though the name was in the title, but it lacked a good script. Brides of Dracula did, however, bring back Peter Cushing to recreate Van Helsing, a role he would play again in 2 more films with Lee. Cushing's Van Helsing was the only redeeming value of an otherwise silly movie.
Marianne, don't look at his eyes. Marianne, look at me!
After the dismal response to Brides, Hammer and Lee reunited to resurrect Dracula in the lavish production called Dracula, Prince of Darkness. It was handsomely directed by Terence Fisher and featured some horrific scenes for a movie made in 1966. But for some strange reason, it was decided that Lee would not speak in his film, and he spent most of his time hissing.
Something wrong, isn't there? Where's Alan?
Nothing's wrong. Come, sister.
Where's Charles?
You don't need Charles.
Lee returned again in 1969's Dracula as Risen from the Grave. As in the previous movie Prince of Darkness, this film opens with Count Dracula meeting his demise in the previous movie and then shown how he is brought back to life. A critical success, Dracula as Risen from the Grave showed Lee at his best as the Count. Well written, directed, and with some breathtaking scenes in a realistic-looking Victorian setting, many feel it was his finest Dracula film, even more so than the horror of Dracula.
Quickly, before he wakes. Quickly. You must do it now.
But you can't keep a good count down. Seeing big box office dollars from their films, Hammer and Lee went on to release 4 more Dracula movies. However, by this time, Lee had become bored with the role and pretty much sleepwalked through Taste the Blood of Dracula, followed by The Scars of Dracula. Later, Dracula was transported to modern-day London in Dracula AD 1973, and finally his demise in The Satanic Rites of Dracula in 1974.
The Son, and the Holy Ghost.
In recent years, Christopher Lee has been introduced to a new audience of movie fans as the evil Count Dooku in the Star Wars films and as Saruman in The Lord of the Rings. A dominant evil figure, Lee, now in his 80s, could still portray a convincing Dracula. Some notable actors who have appeared in the role of Dracula have been Jack Palance and actor Louis Jourdan. Even Tom Cruise took a turn in a role as a vampire in the movie Interview with the Vampire, based on the best-selling novel by Anne Rice. Cruise looked out of place with long blonde hair and effeminate mannerisms. He just couldn't hold a candle to either Lee or Lugosi.
Do you still want death? Or have you tasted it enough?
In 1972, director Roman Polanski produced The Fearless Vampire Killers with his then-wife actress Sharon Tate, who later was murdered by the Charles Manson followers. Also known as Pardon Me, But Your Teeth Are in My Neck, the stark, humid send-up of vampire films was a low point in an otherwise distinguished film career of Polanski.
We've got a congress in Venice. The palaces, the sky, Venice, Sarah, Venice. The gondolas, the sun, the sea.
At the next turn, he makes the door.
Light, life, love,
When I say home, we make for the door and run for it.
our love.
Snatch the girl from them!
But a new era in vampires would arise when Straight from the slick stage production of Dracula flew onto the screen with Frank Langella starring in a new version in 1979. The film would be true to the original classic story, but possessing neither the European expression of Lugosi or the dominating presence of Christopher Lee, Langella relied on his charm and his pretty boy looks to give a new dimension to Dracula. Women in particular found themselves for the first time hypnotized into falling for the Prince of Darkness, almost to the point where they welcomed him to bite their neck. I guess you could say it was the first vampire chick flick. Over the years, not only did you find Dracula, one of literature's most filmed characters, appear on the screen, but vampires have been shown up in films like Eddie Murphy's Vampire in Brooklyn or Jim Carrey in Once Bitten. There were even teenage vampires in The Lost Boys starring Kiefer Sutherland.
Initiation's over, Michael. Time to join the club.
In 1967, TV introduced a vampire in the form of Barnabas Collins in the series entitled Dark Shadows. starring actor Jonathan Frid as Collins, this low-budget production was so bad that it was common to see overhead microphones in the scenes of the show. Recent years have brought us Sarah Michelle Gellar as the comely vampire hunter in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Count Dracula was played for laughs when permanently tanned actor George Hamilton's career got a shot in the arm when he produced and starred in the hilarious Love at First Bite. Mel Brooks also took a stab at the funny side of vampires with his weak Dracula Dead and Loving It, starring veteran actor Leslie Nielsen, who scored more success with his Naked Gun movies.
It is so bright, so many colors, and the sun is so warm. Hello, young lovers. I could not help but smell your lovely picnic. Could I presume to ask you for a piece of your chicken?
Surely, sir.
Some wine, sir?
I never drink wine. Ah, what the hell? Let me try it. It's good.
Master! Master!
Renfield, look at me. I'm drinking wine and eating chicken.
Master, what are you doing out in the daytime?
Relax, Renfield. I am cured.
No, you're not. Look.
Ooh, I made a mistake. I've got to get back to my cabin. It's nighttime, but it wasn't real. I was having a daymare.
Looking to return to a serious big-budget production of Dracula, famed producer-director Francis Ford Coppola brought to the screen what he called Bram Stoker's Dracula. Coppola, who made cinematic history with his Godfather series and Apocalypse Now, did not fare well here, but it was a well-done production, and Gary Oldman did justice in his performance as Dracula.
Do not fear me.
Stop this. Stop. God, who are you? I know you.
I have crossed oceans of time to find you.
Other interesting vampire Dracula films to watch are The Hunger with David Bowie, John Carpenter's Vampires, Salem's Lot, and Fright Night. Fright Night featured the late Roddy McDowall in a Van Helsing-like role. Its special effects and makeup made this a very scary picture to view. When watching it, take notice of a young Amanda Burse, who later gained fame as Marcy Darcy on TV's Married with Children. British actor Robert Quarry starred in 2 inferior Dracula ripoffs portraying the vampire Count Yorga. The film had more unintended laughter than it did horror that they should have named it Count Yoda. During the 70s, when blaxploitation films were popular, a now-aged distinguished actor named William Marshall was reduced to playing an African-American vampire, sadly named Count Blackula, in the movie Blackula and its sequel, Scream, Blackula, Scream. The films were so bad the audience should have screamed for their money back. Motion pictures have produced all types of vampires. We've had space vampires, Hispanic vampires, gay and lesbian vampires, and even cowboys who are vampires. Horror director Wes Craven kept the legend of vampires alive when he came out with Dracula 2000, and Wesley Snipes became a sympathetic hero as a good vampire who sets out to destroy evil vampires in a trilogy of films named after his character known as Blade. And even Disney jumped into the foray with their release of The Little Vampire. A young boy, Jonathan Lipke from the Stuart Little movies, befriends a family of friendly vampires longing to be freed from their curse.
Hide, my parents are coming. Oh, we're brothers. They don't know that. Go. Mama, Papa!
Rudolph, thank the stars, you see.
My son, you must not stray so far away again.
We were afraid
I
that
was only taking the road less traveled.
you got lost, my poor Rudolph.
Yoo-hoo! Anna!
Brother, darling. You're the nervy one, sneaking off like some daywalker.
I wish. So, Father, did you find the stone?
No, but I'm sure we're on the right path.
Because...
We still have 48 hours.
You see,
I
that's...
will not fail you.
Gregory?
And leave us not forget Dracula's nemesis, Professor Van Helsing. This pivotal character has been portrayed by some of Hollywood's biggest names. Edward Van Sloan played opposite Lugosi, and Sir Laurence Olivier played opposite Langella. But the actor who made Van Helsing a household name was Peter Cushing. Cushing played the role more times than any other actor, and his name is synonymous with the character. Universal Studios, who first introduced us to Dracula with the 1931 Lugosi version, thought so highly of the Van Helsing character that they released a movie on the Vampire Hunter in 2003. Starring Hugh Jackman in the Van Helsing role, the movie Van Helsing, the hero battled Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, and even Mr. Hyde. And although the special effects were impressive, the film was, to say the least, a dud. Over 100 years of films on Dracula and vampires, I would have to say the Prince of Darkness will forever rise from the ashes, at least in the movies. I hope you've enjoyed these neck-biting, these nail-biting film clips and stills, and a bit of history of the films of Dracula. I must, however, take leave of you now. I am going out for a bite. But before I do, I think I will quench my thirst. Would you like a glass?
I never drink. Why?
Of course, how could I have forgotten? Well, cheers.
Back. Back. Back.
Yes, master.
Give me some Dracula.
This is to all the little ghosts and goblins out there tonight. Have a nice and happy, safe Halloween.